Another important point I'm about to make, probably the most important point of this video, I never said anything about ahistoricity, as you assert. But let's just get real for a second, Tommy. Seriously, it's the beating around the bush. What I'm about to say, yeah, as I say, is probably my main point, but I'm going to go on to talk about some more stuff afterwards, but this is my main point, really. If I said to you, I bought a pint of milk yesterday, you probably wouldn't doubt it, even though you might not have any proof. If I said, I met Richard Dawkins yesterday, you might not doubt me, but you might need a little bit of proof. You'd probably ask, where? How come? To which I'd say something like, I went to a talk he was giving at such and such a place, and he signed my copy of The Selfish Gene for me. Sounds fairly believable. If, on the other hand, I said, I met Richard Dawkins yesterday, and he was so enamoured with me that he took me home for dinner to meet his wife, and then afterwards, strange, for dessert, he took me up to his study, where he locked me in, and made sweet passionate love to my arsehole. You'd probably be highly doubtful. If I managed to get 20 witnesses, 100, 1,000 to Dawkins boasting of how he penetrated my rump, you might still think this was some sort of elaborate ploy. I mean, it seems a bit ridiculous. If Richard Dawkins himself said on video on YouTube, yes, I pumped Brian's arse full of my creamy spunk, you might still be dubious, because the vid could be edited somehow, or it's possible Dawkins might be lying or in on it, or there might be some other reason, you know. Now think about this. Given that you would be so sceptical that Dawkins had pumped me in the arse, how much more sceptical would you be if I told you the laws of the universe themselves were broken or bent out of all recognition by some miraculous occurrence? Say, Dawkins' cock grew to 25 feet long, or maybe he died making love to me and then rose again 3 days later. You'd probably not believe it, and you'd be a fool to believe it, in fact. You'd want certain conditions set up, certain kinds of conditions set up, that is, you know, scientific equipment, reputable scientists, cameras, you know, all sorts of recording equipment, controlled conditions, and then maybe you might want to test Dawkins' body, compare it to a previous physical exam he might have had to try and determine if he had actually died mid-coitus. You probably want to examine me, examine my rump, see if it had Dawkins' spunk in it, and also whether I had any typical stress marks that tend to occur from a thorough ramrodding. Now, all of these conditions would be fairly tricky to set up in, you know, if this event happened today. But what you're asking for is us to believe that equally unlikely bending or breaking of the laws of nature happened, but 2,000 years ago. So we don't any longer have any way whatsoever of testing the veracity of these claims. You know, we don't have the people alive today to test, to examine. We didn't have the controlled conditions. There's no way of saying if it happened or not. You know, in fact, it's worse than that. You believe it or not, you're asking us to bet our very immortal souls on the veracity of that story. I'm sorry, Tommy, but the sad reality is that we can piddle on about Josephus, or whoever the hell we want, but the sad reality, sad for Christians that is that we cannot possibly get the requisite evidence and conditions to show that yes, Jesus did arise from the dead. Therefore, it is impossible to hold the Christian position unless one, at least partially, closes oneself off to rationality and accepts certain things on faith. And of course, thinking Christians like you, and I'm not being facetious when I refer to you as a thinking Christian, cannot possibly say, yes, I take it on faith against reason, because you realise, as you do, that that would mean you would have to excuse yourself from the conversation. You know, if you just said, yeah, faith against reason, that's it. You leave the room. So that's why you won't say that. But, you know, you kind of have to, I think, for your position to be coherent. Anyway, point 9. About the women, you're saying that the women going on about the empty tomb had no effect as far as priming people to actually see Jesus goes? Is that what you're claiming? I mean, that's what it sounds like to me. If so, I find that to be completely bizarre. Yeah. 11. Perhaps I wasn't too clear on this point before. I'll try and be a bit more lucid this time. What I was saying was essentially that many people seem to be rather confused about the identity of Jesus. So that some hypothetical later person could have been mistaken for the risen Jesus, in one theory of the resurrection, or that people would be seeing Jesus all over the place anyway, is not too unbelievable. I mean, that's to say, clearly people were seeing what they wanted to see and had difficulty identifying Jesus in the passage we discussed. So why should we take post-death identifications of him as reliable? I mean, people have shown that they're confused about his identity and they're credulous. 12. Explanations for the empty tomb. Okay, we're on to fresh ground here, because we haven't really talked about this topic yet. However, after a few days considering my response, I have to say the Amazing Atheist points near the beginning of his video, The Resurrection Debate Lives On, I'll put a link to that in the sidebar, pretty well summarise my thoughts on the topic, so instead of repeating them, I'll just refer you to that video instead on that issue. 13. Tommy, you say the followers of Jesus could say Jesus would rise at the end of time instead. Well, they could say a lot of things, Tommy, but the point is, assuming for argument's sake this belief in belief hypothesis I proposed earlier and which we're running with presently, maybe they had belief in certain specific propositions, you know, one of which is people would only act the right way, the moral way, according to them, if they believed Jesus rose in the way he is purported to have, and not in this traditional Jewish way. You may claim, again, this is all hypothetical on my part, but most of this debate is hypothetical. All I'm doing here is positing reasons for how it's possible to die for something you know, suspect, or believe to be a lie. Okay. 14. I was wondering if you'd raise this point, Tommy. I'm kind of glad you did in a way. You say Muslim extremists believe on it secondary evidence, the Quran, whereas the apostles believed on primary evidence. Okay. Muslims today believe it on the word of the Quran, and some of them probably have personal revelations, I'm sure. Likewise, Christians today believe it on the word of the Bible, and some of them probably have personal revelations. So your comparison seems unfair. I mean, the apostles witnessed it firsthand, but then Muhammad and his followers witnessed it firsthand. And, you know, I don't know much about the details of Islam, but certain events were witnessed by his contemporaries, for instance, where he flew off on his magical horse into heaven. So the idea that Christianity is, you know, somehow based on primary evidence, whereas Islam is secondary, is complete rubbish. It's not a valid argument. Also, you say that your martyrdom points were made just to show that the apostles were not willingly lying. I remember I didn't claim, you know, just for everyone else, I didn't claim they were lying. I was just saying it's possible they could have been. But you still haven't addressed my points, I don't believe. Namely, that it is possible, consciously, to know that what you're saying is not true, but still say it nonetheless, even though you know it will get you killed. And I already discussed that in my other vids, discussed it a minute ago. Mainly it's to do with the belief and belief proposition, and you haven't really dealt with this. Cheers. Thank you for watching again, or at all. Yeah.